Well, hey everybody. How's everybody doing today? Trying to get my camera just right if I can. There we go. Hope everybody's doing well today. If you're not familiar with me, my name is Paul Turner from thediscipleproject.net. And we're going to be talking today about, is youth ministry all about the numbers? Is it all about the numbers, right? Because, having worked at several churches, I can tell you that numbers played an important part of most conversations I had with some pastors. I won't say all of them, but they do. That numbers issue is something we're going to unpack a little bit today. And speaking of unpacking, I just got something in the mail here. Thought I'd just open it with you, if I may, while we're waiting for people to kind of show up and engage. By the way, I encourage you to engage because if you are facing the numbers dilemma, you're going to ask some questions. So feel free to go ahead and leave some comments, and I will be able to answer your questions as we go along here. But anyway, part of the unpacking here, of what I'm unpacking here, is I ordered something in the mail here, and if I can find a way to get this, here we go. I think I found it. If I can open it this way, that'd be good. Is an album. That's right, vinyl of a classic Christian album that I've been wanting for some time, and it is actually a Mylon Lefevre and Broken Heart album. That's right, an album, vinyl, people. Oh, I just love it. I love the smell of it. I love lyrics right there in the inner sleeve. I like the photos on the other side. Let's make sure this has gone good. Don't check out on me here. I'm just enjoying the moment here, waiting for some people to show up. And the album itself is not in bad shape. So I am looking forward to it. And not only does it have really, really good music on here, but Mylon he's a preacher today. I believe he's in Atlanta still. And he does a great job. Gives a good word on here. I wore this thing out when I think it was a tape or something I had when I was a teenager. And I said, I'm going to get this thing when it's an album. And that way I don't have to worry about it. Because it is not available. Say, Paul, why didn't you download it? Well, because it wasn't available for download. So, album, Mylon Lefevre. So, excitement. All right, that's it. That was my little gift to you. Okay? Let's talk about the numbers real quick. Is it all about the numbers? Well, let me make a differentiation here. If numbers are the focus, if you're hearing that all the time, there may be some problem in the church itself with this numbers itself. But I will say this, that if it's constant, and I did a poll earlier on Twitter, and I did it right here with you guys, feel free to tell me, how often do you hear about numbers? I would like to, in the community section, if you go to the community tab, there's a poll there, and I would like to hear from you. It says, how often does your pastor mention or bring up numbers in the youth ministry? Usually if they're up, you usually don't hear about it. If they're down, you do. But there's 4 choices there. I think it's like sometimes, often, all the time, and please shut up already. Okay, because maybe you're talking about it too much, or you're hearing about it too much. But I'll say this: as far as I think numbers can be a sign of carnally minded leadership, right? To be carnally minded is to be fleshly minded, to be only interested in what you can see, and to that end, it's about money. I think it's about money, about image, about pride. More kids gives that pastor who gets to go and hang out with other pastors, gives him some bragging rights to some degree. And once again, these are signs of what I would call carnally minded, right? They're not interested in the spiritual development. They're carnally minded, whether it's us or our senior pastors, tend to focus on the big event. How's youth ministry? Big event, numbers, number of kids saved. And you say, was that carnal, Paul? Sometimes, yeah. If you're talking about numbers, and all we're doing is barking out numbers about all the great events, all things, and in between the cracks of those things are maybe really where God is moving the most, right? It's the numbers of the numbers. I used to say that, listen, if I want numbers, I can give away, cocaine and condoms and get a crowd of people at the church. Teenagers would be showing up for miles. But numbers isn't the indicator necessarily, right? Um, but in that vein, you know, um, carnally minded leaders are thinking in terms of, well, if I have more kids, maybe that will draw more families. Maybe that will be, will help boost the ministry in some way, which would give us some advantage, or we'd get more people. And there's a whole thing to that. It's so odd, I guess. It's not odd. I guess it is to me. I guess if you're not a numbers focused guy, I've had to make myself over the years, after 30 years, to be a numbers focused guy, because a lot of times I didn't care. I was the pure heart idealistic guy. Like many of you who came into doing youth work, you thought, man, I'm going to work with teenagers and so forth and so on. And maybe this is the warning label, right? Maybe I need to put a warning label here. Warning. You will be asked about numbers. How many kids are you reaching? How many kids are in attendance? That should be like a warning label maybe on the ministry, as well as some other other warning labels. I'm going to write that down here. I need to do that. That's going to be some sort of blog post. Feel free to leave your warning label. Just put warning label. What should come on youth ministry? Warning labels. Here we go. Warning labels. Labels for youth ministry. Okay. You'll hear about that. Okay. Maybe I'll do a whole series on that. Who knows? So as we move along here, so what is then the carnally minded, or then say, what is the spiritually minded, right? We talk about that, lack of numbers. We talk about lack of numbers equals lack of money. I don't know why I'm doing that with money, but money is real. Money is not figurative. It's a lack of numbers for things is lack of money. And so there's a lot of worry within the church. You're hearing about it on the surface level, but what they're not telling you maybe in the congregation is that there's budget problems, there's giving problems, there's attendance problems, there's numbers problems, there's membership problems, there's all kinds of things going on there. And so you, the youth pastor, have to do your job better, as if to that is going to fix all that is going on within that church. And by the way, you can just take that off of you right now, because as an associate pastor, you help even out and bear some of that burden, but you should not carry that burden by yourself. That burden is not yours to bear, okay? You're not the lead pastor. You do your part best way you know how, okay? In the healthy church, or the spiritually minded leadership there, numbers are an indicator. They are not the goal. Numbers are an indicator, not the goal. Because in a healthy church, if you're thinking about people in attendance may not be growing. People in attendance may not be maturing in their faith. People in attendance may not be giving. There's all kinds of things that are going on there. But for the healthy-minded individual, the healthy-minded leader, it's really more about indicators. They're looking at indicators, and they're saying, listen, I think, the carnally minded leader drives you to work harder. The spiritually minded or healthy church minded leader says, how can I help you? How can we help you as a whole ministry, help you to get better at what you do to reach more kids? Do we need to up your budget? Do we need to give you more volunteers? What are your dreams? What are your goals? How do we fulfill all that? And I think that's the key. I think that's the key between that. Carnally minded leaders drive you, and spiritually minded leaders lead you and help you to do these things. And so, let me offer you some tips here, because if you're dealing with the struggle, and the struggle is real about numbers, and is it about numbers? Yes. Is it not about numbers? Yes. It's all the above. It's just a matter of how you look at the numbers. And either numbers are an indicator that you're not doing your job, or numbers are an indicator that you need help, right? But the number one thing you have to do as a youth pastor is be in communication with those who lead you to say, okay, what is success? What is the numbers? If you're looking for numbers, what are those numbers? How many? What is success to you? What is this overall overarching? What is a successful ministry, and how do numbers fit in with that overall arching? Is everything that if success is you're making disciples, then maybe growth isn't such a factor. That kids are being disciples, they're knowing the word, they're serving, they're doing a lot of things. If and they're reaching the lost, by the way, disciples. We'll get into that in a little while. But if you're trying to define what success is, the question is, where does numbers fit into that? If something is super successful, is it explosive? I don't know. I don't think it is, because there's so many churches that have what I would call successful youth ministries because they're doing youth ministry well. They're ministering to the teenagers in their church, but they're not experiencing exponential growth. We say, well, doesn't one produce the other? Not necessarily. It's about reach, maybe, not attendance. Maybe you're reaching a lot of kids, but the attendance isn't there. And I think that has to be quantified in some way. Do you have a reach? Maybe you go down and you have an outreach at a local apartment complex, and you're reaching teenagers there, and you're doing something in the afternoons to reach them. So maybe it's about defining reach and attendance, or influence and attendance. How many are you reaching versus how many is in attendance? And attendance, it once again is the all-consuming focus of some leaders who care about how many noses are in seats. Noses are in seats? No. Butts are in seats. Noses that are in the room. Nickels that are in the offering. It's something like that. It's something I've heard before. Don't hate me. Okay. So anyway, define what success is. Number 2, I would say, do everything you know how to do. If you don't know how to do this, well, I don't know how to grow my youth ministry. I don't know what else I can do. I think you've got to do your homework. I think you've got to do research, read books, watch YouTube videos, which, by the way, talking about growth, I'm going to leave a link here, one here, and then one in about 10 more seconds here to a couple of videos I did about growing your youth ministry. One is a bit of a snarky video, which talks about the 10 worst ways. I think the 10 worst ways to grow your ministry. There'll be a link here up there, and then one down below. And then one where I do a real video about what I think it takes to get serious growth happening, and the factors that go into that. But you, as a youth worker, you have to do your due diligence. You have to do your homework. You have to look at the things that are going around your community. You have to navigate the relationships. You have to, do those things. It can't be you can't just shrug. Shrugging is not an answer, and 9 times out of 10 is unacceptable. Okay, just to let you know, shrugging is not an acceptable answer to why don't you have more kids in your youth ministry. I think that's something we have to look at. And a lot of times, I'll be honest with you, there's a lot of youth workers that they use excuses why they can't do something when they've not tried everything. They have done they've done what they know how to do, but are unwilling to grow in their own selves, to push themselves to reach more students, or to learn a new skill, or to get out into an area that's uncomfortable, and all those kind of things. So I think you, as a youth worker, you have to determine, have I done everything I'm supposed to do? Have I done everything I can do? Have I done research? Have I done the reading? Have I called people in the community, other youth workers, and say, are they experiencing the same similar things that I am? Is it, maybe it's about coaching, right? Maybe I could help you. Maybe because I do offer like a 30 for 30, right? $30 for 30 minutes. If you want to talk about your situation, there'll be a link down in the description below. I mean, it's $30 well spent. If you want to talk about your situation, I will help you hammer that out. I will help you work through the issues and challenges and obstacles and all that kind of stuff to maybe get you where you want to be. But the point is, do everything you know how to do, because they're going to ask you, your leaders, your supervisors, your pastor, whoever it is, what are you doing to turn the Titanic around here, right? What are you doing here? And you're going to have to say, well, I'm doing X, and I'm doing X, and I'm doing X. There has to be some personal responsibility to that, which then goes to this. Examine your current strategy. right? What are you doing right now? What are you doing to reach more students? Now, I am doing what I know how to do and here's where we need to be careful with this. Every week, and I've done this about, and in that regard. But if you're doing, an outreach, say, hey, we're giving away a gajillion dollars and free food and everything else, that's hard. That's not sustainable. I don't think is a sustainable strategy. I think kids will come as long as you do it. Whatever you do to get them to come in, when you stop doing that, they will then go away. That's just been my experience and the experience of many other people. So you have to look at your strategy and say, what am I doing? What am I doing on a personal level? Where am I going to meet students? Am I volunteering at the school? Am I, giving away donuts at the bus stop where a big load of teenagers hang out? Am I figuring out how to engage with teenagers beyond the church walls? Those are all things that you have to look at as a youth worker, because people are going to ask you, what are you doing? And say, well, I'm doing everything I know how to do, and I'm learning more ways to do it. And eventually you have to say, look, too, that maybe we have limits, right? There are things that we cannot do. That goes back to what your job description is and what you were hired for and all that kind of stuff. So make sure you read that job description, because that's kind of important too. What are your expectations? We're getting to that, which goes into the next point I have here, which is define expectations with your leadership. Now, your job description may not have all the expectations. There's always, say it with me, there are always unwritten expectations. Always. And they're going to be there forever and ever till Jesus comes. You're going to have to revisit this and say, listen, my job description says this, but now I'm hearing this. Is there a change? Is there a shift in what my job is per se? And you have to be able to look and say, are the expectations reasonable or are they unreasonable? Okay. You know what? If your leadership says that numbers matter, then guess what? Numbers matter. And it doesn't matter what you say, but I can't, but doesn't matter. It's part of the deal that numbers matter. And they're going to matter because I remember getting the talk. Every staff meeting was, how many did you have if our meetings were, I think, were on Thursday, how many did you have last night? That was just part of the discussion. So I knew going in, I'd have to talk about the numbers. Well, we had numbers. And then I would have to say and clarify things like, but it was a holiday, or it was raining out, or, I'd have to hem-haw and whatever. And then I'd have to say, okay, well, then I got to go follow up. And by the way, following up is a strategy. Following up is saying, okay, did we call kids and find out why they weren't there? And not in a negative sense, like, hey, where were you? It was more like, hey, buddy, missed you. Man, I hope you're doing okay. Anything I can, because really you're finding out needs at that point. If somebody's not there, it could be because they're studying. It could be because they're sick. It could be because there's a family emergency. Because when you get the question, and I used to get the question, then I'm going to have to say, look, I need a list of things to say, okay, these people were missing, but let me tell you why they're missing. I was missing 5 kids because they were on a basketball trip. I was missing X amount of kids. You have to be clear about those things, because if your people think it's about the numbers, then it's about the numbers. By the way, I'm just going to keep going here. So if you have questions, feel free to chime in. If you have questions about numbers, or maybe you are saying, listen, I hear about numbers all the time. How do I deal with this? The struggle is real. I get it. But you're going to have to be able to look at that and say, what are my expectations of leadership? And what do I need to do to meet those expectations, right? Because that's what you're going to have to do. That's what you're paid to do, is meet expectations, right? Those is maybe whether the expectations are written or unwritten sometimes. And that's where you have to parse those out, right? Let me move on. So then you have to look at, if you're in concerning the numbers, ask yourself about discipleship, because, and here, let me grab this real quick. Okay, when you're thinking and talking about discipleship, if you're going to count numbers, okay, you're counting things like how many do I have in Sunday school? How many's in the church on Sunday? How many do I have on Wednesday night? How many came to the off night outreach? But you need to count in there how many kids know the Lord, like a spiritual evidence, like of these 20 kids, right? And I don't think there's anything wrong with this. You have to know who's in the room. Of the 20 kids you have, half might not know the Lord. They might not have a relationship with Jesus Christ. I mean, they might not be born again. I mean, they have a relationship. It's just not a very good one. But you're going to have to say, okay, how many kids in the room? Where are they at on what I would call the Jesus spectrum, right? That on the Jesus spectrum, I'll use a little pencil here. If this is Jesus here, and my kids don't know Jesus and they're way over here, then I cannot expect them to perform as somebody who is a Christian and they're over here somewhere on the Jesus spectrum, right? These guys are not going to perform the way these guys do because their relationship with the Lord is closer, theirs is further away. And say, but isn't that your job? Listen, I get it. It is a cycle of stupid that we have discussions with people about these things as if to say we are the Holy Ghost and we are going to somehow move kids. It is incremental at best. God does the work. I can only move kids from here to here to put them in position, if you will, to experience and grow closer to the Lord through programming, through relationships, through opportunities, through lunches, but listen, ultimately, it's what God does. I can't make a kid more born again. I can't get them. I mean, I have my limitations. I just do. And we're going to have to say, Lord, and by the way, when we say we do everything, we're praying, right? That's a given that we're praying for the church. We're praying for our youth ministry. We're praying for the kids. We're praying for ourselves. We're giving God far more control of things than we can possibly ever do, because in the end, it's going to be what He does that will last, not our programs, not our things that we're doing. Those will fade. Those are going to burn up. By the way, in the deal there, all that stuff's going to burn up, and all that's going to be left is what we did for the kingdom. So, but we do have to look at our discipleship. Okay, count how many disciples you have. How many people are literally following Jesus, not figuratively. Because just because they're in attendance doesn't mean they're following Jesus. That means they have an affiliation. They're the crowd, right? They're the people who maybe went from place to place looking for miracles, place to place to see what Jesus would do next. But they did not have a relationship with Jesus the way the disciples had Jesus. And of course, I want to talk about this right here, the Disciple Project, that if you're looking for the difference between education and action. I know that many people look at discipleship as an educational thing, and it is. But I will say this, that, faith without works is dead. That doing the gospel and doing the things, we have a lot of hearers, not a lot of doers, James 1:22, where we say, listen, that's my job as effective right now, is to help raise up a generation of doers. Well, the only way I can do that is convince you that doing the gospel is better than, or is complementary to hearing the gospel. That once you do that, I believe doing versus education is this, and doing is that. Doing propels kids a lot forward than just the hearing and the memorization and those things. There's got to be a doing that. So if you're interested in this, link in the description. Okay, let's move along. We're gonna wrap up here in just a little bit. It's not either or both. Okay, so we have to look at discipleship, count disciples, count the people that don't know Jesus, count the people who have an affiliation with Jesus. Figure out who those people are, right? And then that will tell you why your ministry isn't growing as you want it to be. There's reality, by the way. Reality says this is the real thing, right? We're living in a dream world to say that we're going to grow this youth ministry with 20 kids, 10 of which don't know Jesus, 5 are lukewarm, 3 are come to Sunday school and they're good kids, and 2 might have an on-fire relationship with Jesus, maybe 1. And you're trying to build the ministry and grow the group. There has to be a certain amount of honesty with your leadership as to who's in that room and where they're at on the spectrum, okay, with Jesus. Okay, it's not either or, it's both, right? I've heard some people say, and I've read this, I think I read this online the other day. Somebody had quoted and said, engagement is more important than attendance. Well, the question is this: does engagement, the leadership will say, well, does engagement produce growth or produce attendance? Because if that's the expectation, then I agree with the engagement. We ought to be engaging all the time, online, offline, lunches, Snapchat video, whatever it is you want to do to engage. But at the end of the day, it's still going to be that if the attendance, if you can go to your leadership and say, okay, let me tell you how I'm engaging, and here are my hopes for the engagement to turn into attendance. That all that has to be connected somehow in when we talk to people who are numbers focused, right? So I think it's not either or. It's not a engagement or attendance. It's engagement and attendance. And how do we move kids from engagement to attending, right? Another point that I think you have to look at is this: what are you paid to do versus what you're biblically mandated to do? So if you look at your job description, run the program, right? But the biblical mandate is to share the gospel, make disciples. It's not something the church came up with. It's something that Jesus came up with. So at some point, you and I have to exceed our job description to do more of what the scripture, and then how do we fulfill, because we can get lost, guys. Let's just face it. We can get lost in the job description, the culture of the church. We can become as lukewarm, or we tend to conform, if you will, to the temperature that is around us because we have no control over the thermostat, right? Except in our room when we're having youth ministry, we tend to conform to the temperature of the church because we can't control that little lever that says make it hotter when it's colder. We can do that when we're in our youth rooms, but overall, we can't control some of that. We just can't. They don't touch the thermostat. In our churches I've worked in, there's always a lock box on the thermostat. Do you guys have those? Lock box on the thermostat. Don't touch the thermostat. Well, okay. I won't change anything. I can only control what I can only control in this room. I can control that. I can't control everything else, right? But what are you paid to do versus what's biblical mandate? Biblical mandate says, well, I'm going to find a way to do it regardless of what my job description is. Because the Bible says I'm supposed to reach kids. The Bible says I'm supposed to love kids. The Bible says I'm supposed to disciple kids. There's at some level, and by the way, not all job descriptions are spiritually minded. Maybe they can be carnally focused as well. So you have to then ask yourself, okay, what am I paid to do, and what am I biblically mandated to do, and then figure out, say, okay, I have to fulfill this, but I also need to fulfill this, and the biblical mandate is what ought to get us up in the morning and says, I have a biblical mandate to do this. How am I going to reach more kids a day? What can I do? What can I do? Here it is, guys. Here's the focus, right? Ready for this? What can I do out of love today versus what I should do off the paper, right? The paper's telling me I have to do one thing, but what can I do to supersede that out of love versus out of the law, maybe, right? And because we can get hung up in the law and go, and it's just defeating, and it's crushing. But what can I do out of love today? How can I reach kids out of love today? How can I do that? All right, moving right along. What are you measuring? What are you measuring? Right? You can measure attendance is a measurement. I mean, it's not, like I said earlier, it's an indicator, but it's also a measurement, and it can be a measurement with how well you marketed an event, how well your kids understood the purpose of the event, how well you organized the event. If you put it on the wrong date, well, then you put it on a football day that kids were going to be gone. Well, that's on us. We can't blame the kids if we do a poor job of organizing or planning or any of those things. We can't blame kids for that. We have to take blame for that. We can't just throw something on the calendar then expect kids just to show up. We have more responsibility than that to craft outreach opportunities to connect with our kids and the friends of our kids. In those times, we can't just be sloppy about it. We have to be able to do something. So don't just measure attendance at an event or attendance. Look at the program. What are you measuring? If you're measuring that, then measure yourself by it. Say, am I giving my best? Am I giving 100%? Am I doing what I'm supposed to be doing? Right? Also, don't use the quality versus quantity argument. I would say this. It's just an old argument. Well, what about the quality of the youth ministry? It's not either or. It's both. You're focused on trying to reach more kids while running a quality program. But I don't have time, and I don't have time to do this because now I'm doing all this, and it doesn't stop. It's not going to stop, and that doesn't stop the expectations. You're still going to have to figure out how to have a quality youth program with quality, and that usually involves recruiting and finding more staff. So that you can have the depth of relationship you think the youth ministry deserves, so that other people can be working on other things, or vice versa. Somebody's got to do the depth and the quality stuff while quantity is still being considered and options are being looked for, because that's going to be the expectation. You got to look at that, okay? We'll wrap with this, okay? And maybe I'll do I don't know, we got a few more here. Let me just say this, don't let the pressure get to you, okay? I know it's hard. I know some of you are watching this and you are discouraged and you're heartbroken and you're tired of getting ripped in staff meetings, or you're tired of hearing it from other people, or maybe nobody's saying anything. That's an unusual thing. I've had a number of people who say, look, we don't talk about numbers. Well, okay, I find that equally scary because it sounds like there may or may not be accountability there. I don't know. I hope there is. Everybody's doing their job, right? And if that's the case, fantastic. But if nobody's thinking about the numbers and nobody's thinking about that in that regard, well, then, we have to look at that as well. But don't let the pressure, listen, you got to be you, okay? You may not be some superstar youth pastor. You may not be, play guitar, and you don't wear hipster clothes. And you know what? It's perfectly okay. Don't let the pressure, you have to be you, right? You be you. You can't be some other guy down the street. You're not going to duplicate what that guy does because they've been gifted with their stuff. You've been gifted with your stuff. Do you. Stop trying to do everybody else, right? But don't be apologetic either for who you are. Don't say, I'm sorry that I'm not good enough. Well, you're doing the best job you know how to do because you're you. As long as you're learning, growing, figuring it out, you can do it. So don't beat yourself up today and go, I'm a terrible youth pastor. Maybe not. I used to get in trouble for all kinds of things. And somebody said to me, Paul, when did the disciples get in trouble? Well, usually when they were doing what God wanted them to do. Yeah, so he said to me, maybe you're doing it right. So you're getting in trouble because maybe you're doing it right. That's just an option, right? I'm going to stop there. I think 30 minutes is long enough. If you want more, I will include, and what do I have here? 1, 2, 3. I'm going to do a little article on this. I'm going to leave that in the link below a little bit later. But if you want to get the notes on this, I'll leave the notes. I'll have a blog post up here shortly to share with you guys. But I want to thank you guys for just tuning in and visiting, hanging out for a little while. If you are brand spanking new to the channel, you've never seen me before, and you say, well, this is fascinating. I'm a youth worker, and I've never heard of you or anything like that. Please go ahead and subscribe. Go ahead and hit the things over here or the button down below, the little bell. That will get you these videos in your inbox on a regular basis. If you like the video, please hit the thumbs up button. Let's mean you like it. You want more of it. And that's about it for today, guys. By the way, too, if you think this might help somebody, share it with them. All right? But that's it. That's it for Wednesday at 1, guys. Leave your questions down below if you have any, and I'll catch you guys in the next video. We'll talk to you guys later. Bye.